Well, again, a few things. Firstly, now it is the end of October, and majority of the teachings have been completed during the first half of the year, and the second half of the year's teaching is still in progress. Not only the study aspect, but our change of management, change of the rotas, and everything within the management aspect is also in progress. I hope that the relevant management members should be responsible and carry on the tasks that you should. Otherwise, it could caught you unexpected, and that is not good. You need to have a plan to follow through by each of the timeline or each of the deadline, especially the relevant management team and members, the leaders. You need to know when the deadline is. Otherwise, if you were to only start off any project but without completing it or dragging for too long, then that is really not beneficial. In our previous meetings, we had already, for example, made the plans that in the next week or the week after next week, you need to finish this and that. You need to then follow through with those kinds of plans. Not so sure what is the reason, but out of various kinds of reasons, it seems that our management team just in general doesn't have any plans at all. They would host meetings whenever they want to, and send out announcements and call for meetings whenever they wish. There is no plan to follow through at all. That is not the proper management. This is such a large sangha, such a large Buddhist academy. I hope that the Khenpos and Khenpos could also advance yourself in terms of the management skills and not just the Dharma teaching. If you feel that, well, I've studied so much already, I don't need to study the management aspect of things, that is not an appropriate way of dealing with it, because management has a different set of knowledge, and you need to carry your responsibilities. You need to study, you need to be smart in these kinds of aspects. So I really hope that you can follow through rather than after starting any project and it's just like throwing a pebble into the ocean. You don't know what happens next. That is not good. You need to actually carry on the projects and follow through those projects. The second one is that some of our members over here, some of the people who actually work here, and some of the people that temporarily stay here, you need to get permissions from the Khenpos and Khenpos or the management team. Otherwise, you cannot just start to broadcast and start to receive interviews without even being permitted to stay here. You need to receive the permission and consent from the management team first. Otherwise, you have no reason and no right to speak on behalf of Larungar. To speak on behalf of Larungar is something that I do not even dare to say. It's something that's quite risky. Currently, Larungar is under different tiers of management departments. If you were to be able to make contribution, of course, that's really wonderful. But sometimes wishful conduct would only bring smears to Larungar. Also, if you're not part of the management team and have no idea who is performing the interview, yet to receive receiving the interview, that is quite unreasonable. If I were to receive any interview, I need to, first of all, know who this person is, what's the background, and what's the reason of interviewing me. If you do not know that at all, rather thinking that this is my freedom of receiving an interview or not, this is not very wise. Also, if you really want to receive interviews, you can go to the management team and you can go to either the Tibetan management team or the Chinese management team and tell them that I wish to be interviewed. Or you can tell them that while I'm in charge of this and that, I wish to be interviewed. Well, there are different levels of supervisors and managers, your own supervisor and also the management team, the directors over here as well. There are tiers of this management as well. You can be informed if there's such a situation. Also, you need to consider that whatever you are saying to the others are going to be spread far and wide. For example, over here we have those large speakers, and if you were to give a speech to everybody through the large speaker, would you think twice about what can be said and what cannot be said? It cannot be said. Also, would you consider about what is in violation of the Dharma and what is in violation of the policy and what is in violation of the values or core values of people over here? You need to think about that. It is not that you think that you're the only one that can receive the interview and you get enthusiastic because you feel you're too smart. When it comes to management, you shouldn't just attend any meetings that you're not invited, or you shouldn't just skip different levels of the management teams. There are people who tend to not speak at all because they feel quite afraid of making mistakes, and there are people who are completely of the opposite. They do not care if their speech would bring harm or shame to Larangar at all. So I really hope that in the future, whatever kinds of activities that you involve in, whatever kinds of interviews and whatsoever you get involved over here in Larangar, you need to get permissions. Without such, you shouldn't do that at all. On top of that, the corresponding management and leadership over here, you need to broaden your perspective and get smarter. Otherwise, if you were to speak of everything, sometimes whatever your speech was could cause lots of problems. And sometimes certain supervisors do not speak at all. They're just like a mute. And when the government authorities try to talk to those kinds of leaders, they would get frustrated and then contact me instead and saying that why doesn't this person speak at all? Well, in terms of speech, we need to have a sense of limit. We need to know what can be said and what cannot be said. Otherwise, language could bring lots of obstacles. In Larangar, we have the opportunities of study, contemplation, and practice. But if you do not cherish it, if you do not skillfully work with those opportunities, then I think it's rather quite foolish. Well, again, it is just like if you're an employee of a company, if other companies requested you to get involved with certain activities that is related to your own company, then you need to at least talk to the supervisor of your own company first, getting permissions first, and then you can carry out whatever kinds of activities. Without these kinds of management procedures, then it could be quite difficult. Let's now continue with our class on the baskets display.
야후 특집선로 열라면 지금 번조자라 소란데 공기 또반보로 신지로 우상선상微妙变成完全难找我今见闻得书持研究出了真实意为度化一切众生请大家发无上的菩提心Rigjivan Dartarte, Hui Nalange Bimmer Namji, Lale, Ne Dan Cho Dan Je, Dan Jachan Dan, Varastan, Jachan Dan Vachan La Soba Dan, Jashik Dan Chanchong La Soba. Number not so Barashi, De Li Jarbo Terran, Di Sun Charvar Jan Pam Nim Javate Dan Jabadan, Shman Janman Din Ungini, Zanglang, the Yero Chu Badan, Stadan, Kurdan, Wambo. Dans combat j'ai de yerandane nan de jigne walang dang won wa ta kap chig de pombo jimbo ji jang ri ji wang zhe zhe ne zhang ni ji ri ji wei ge zhe bu reng chen bon de la ji lu bu so nam ji pombo na nge zhang ram ni so ri ji wen dar tar te hui na chu chen bon zang wei lang de nin chan de bar wan de Sangha dang, Ganga dang, Sida dang, Ganga dang, Yamen dang, Sunda dang, Pukye dang, Tacha Zhi dang, Danjak Baga dang, Irabad dang, Samagada dang, He Magala dang, Kodapur, Chiu Riri Zhang, Kur Ngab Gyab Yoba Nyam Sandar Gyamsu, Shang Nam Sam Babu, Rikiwa, Yige Chikban de Ringa Chimbu Lan, Chik Dubu Sonam Gi Pombo Yang. Devjin de per lo de na che wo chimbo de de kan nge thuk ba re ne jang ni je ri ji yi ge zhi ba ri ngo chin bo la no chi do bo sonam ji pong bo na zhong ren ma ni so ri ji wen de tar te hui na kang ba ji ri wa lang dang wong wa dang ma he dang ta dang wa lang dang che dang wa dang ra dang shi de dang de jin de sang ge dang ta dang ga dang re dang zhi ge dang ro dang pa la so ba dang xi wa dang是啦啦，说吧，得到讲不让呢，我日日呢，我让你接一个这个人全部都拉，就多不说那句碰碰那个让么你说这基本他会呢，我都接受的几下吧，日点不不得，或者个车个东当我的或者也是日东当日点不都接受的第如我日日上或者也是。日东有把的啦，日点不听我啦，接我们个门车话是有把的，搞话这个的像也是干些干点种我估计让这个是的，这是讲啥讲的样，当然就是就一个这个人全部的让这都不算那么碰碰那个种人没你说，这个问的会那讲做全部讲那。全部南京上市或者也只是懂得个面东个台湾的或者没把我这字幕也且头把日日让你就日结问一个这个人全部让手都不算那么碰碰那个装么你日结问的会那像些给查了记罗马日日那个让你一个这个人全部算那么碰碰那个装么你日结问的会那让全部人那那边结巴当文面当结个当我们得到他们这上就生活啥等巴拉那边的那刚上就生活得到个说那么也碰不呢碰不的一个这人个全部的拉去都不说那么也碰不呢现在这我这结问的会拿到这你这罗马当到학바 당 정와나 다 정섬지 로 정벌 결원 냠선의 저번의 리기행이 특별히는 정리 지리기 이게 릉어 전보랑 집도 손음지 풍부나 정만이서 언더다대 회나 리기 망도 줘도 먹고 제가 당자와 대정서 바시와 니치도 리우카르와 자와당 쇼라당 마탄다 남즈 stengi만지 요시지안에 브러시데 님그르시 바웨장 대정서 바데다 이게 지버링 전부 소놈지 봉법 정문이 나가 시번지 템지 감드네요네 시베스타무죠 something dawan samji meche partiri jiv ngena karwa sumba sumbran gerwa shamson chimbo shere zji wongbo chu te yang chawa maksarbi chu mawon wa shendar nyambur gerwe chu de dola gewale de shendar jiwagum yige jubur ngak chimbo yang tabam ke so rikiv nge janjik tenji kamshia chochu jar tongcho taman jemja songne devjang shakbat nangam tayi jim changar tarmo jerde chuji shi jim chimab shongwe devjang shakbat nangam tayi tarta dang maung waram kende di jang rikiv yige chigba ringa chimbo rikbir jarbu jarmu gombi zonjib shabaran totam jib kapsar ne chomdan dev dang tsar lo tene devrak shakbab dang tsar de chertar komjig dongne cham sorwa devjin dab chomdan dev dagjan yige chigba ringa chimbon sordan jikten ji kamgandam chi de devjin devjin shakbab shia chakchib jar tongcha dama nimgar jiba jang tele jang yige chigba ringa chimbo jarmu ma topki ardab chomdan denam gono jenar kyabor teno wangbo nyamba na migda njerchik wangbo nyamba na migda njerchik lam tongwa na lamda njerchik nima tsawe na tsig namgi na dusu njerchik shirjib jimdo chimbo na shang sala chimbo jimdo njerchik chuji yongsub kumbha na kamba lan tayi bar tombar jirajik simshindu tambi na kurchir jirajik teni teni sabah jabjamba yang dobar zoba sanji nam tayi jibshanju sawa jimbo mpoba shani zo wangbo la Sha kata pangi yang ji karsarba sha kala pangi yang ji karsarba rigjiwer to jik de jong shba jab jamba yang dobur zoba san ji pamim chok yige jik bereng pamim cho yige jik bereng chembu shen jik den ji kamshia chok ju jar tong chok tama xige je rigjiwer yige jik bereng chembu jarmo sur ji de jong shba nger jendang kenda shagso teni jomden de Shanchu Sanghua Shanriang Zi Wangbo La Wangba Indar Kajik Sordo Kyankur Gyajib Sarwar Gyo Chondan Di Chirtarna Maituk Bab Martabab Shig Zana Chirtarna Nora Zanbi Shig Gyar Tokbaran Gyarda Chirtarna Gyarbu Wangbo Tamchi Jib Shig Gyar Tokbaran Gyar Chirtarna Na Gyar Kyankur Yongsu Tokbar Tokbar Gyarjina Kyankur Jim Tsamana Tartarti Chirjiwa Chiringa Kori Zamdan Gyarda Kyankur Ji Huis Nawam Tayi Chigo Tejang Shabat Nawam Tayi Jishko Nora Rumbochi Nranali Shimadang Markati Shimadang Pamaraki Shimadang Shirji Shimadang Serdang Ngerji Shimadang Gyogo Yepshogno Shanju Sangwa Nora Rumbochin Zambara Gyogo Yonshogna Yige Chigba Ringhak Chimbo Gyawarte Zhiba Ka Togan Danvim Dar Gyo Zhinda Karwa Gyanha Zogba Jib Gyamba Shig Yombara Pama Gyogo Pamitanda Nora Gyogo Shig Yebar Ringhak Nora Gyogo Shig Tarmo Jarvi Jarvo Tamchiji Shig Gyab Gyogo Yige Chigba Ringhak Chimbo Di Shab Gyogo Rigun Zambarte Lagba Yebe Pogbur Togo Shang Degbar Gyogo Lagba Yona Gyanamba Natso Jib Kang Shkum Togbar Gyogo Kyankurtina Chavjir Gyarbo Chimbo Jirte Lagna Natso Togbar Gyogo Kyankurti Chavjir Navamba Kang Noru Rumbo Chir Natso Jakko Rigjiwa Mo Kang La Lajik Kyankurtan Jikban Sarne Ti Richard Tamchiji Mangapji la Tokma Kona Nye Kyankurtir Mang Tedo Tsarwar Gyo Tedo Tamchiji Mi Dungur Tamchir Pajang Chiba Tamabi Shanchu Sanghwaran Gyaro Lanami Bayang Tokbar Shanchib Gyam Nyerdam Gombar Zobar San Gyavaran Gyaro Tela Lokhon GyiGne Malak Bara Tsarwar Mabjirte Yangna Tape Mubab Tsarwar Gyogo Yangna Tokba Chimbu Tape Taga Tsarwar Gyogo Martak Chanlap Tsarwar Mabgyogo Tene Devjang Shabadab Chambayang Tokbar Zobar San Nam Tayi Gyi Shanchu Sanghwa Chimbu Mubab Shanez Wangbo Ndarkachib kar tsar to rigjiv Karte Nuru Rinpoche Anjanali Shema Dang Marakata Dang Ser Dang Ngerji Shema Tag Rigji Wagam Rigji Umo Warbola Me To Chondande Shema Te Tag Na Tsun Na Tsokba Lab Gyarajang Me Tok Na Tsokba Dang Dukpu Na Tsokba Gyogo Rigji Wakarte Yirg Janda Sung Ngamag Ne Janda Tabla Table Babra Gyodo Di Tse Tse Logonji Yellak Jernkuru Gyode Logonji Shom Zama Tambra Gyogo Tene Tene Sabat Jumban Dobar Sanji Pamim Chokov Shantu Sanwa Jimbo Shanri Zigi Wombo Lander Kichi Kwapsar Dori Give Yike Chibering Chimo Ringa Chimo Yarmo Nala Jin Jing Semchin Shiva Chotu Yarton Chotamate Tonkura Yons Tarja Nirdu Blanami Bayon Doburzon Choptom Gumber Zobrasan Yavra Shago Tene Tejan Sabat Jumban Doburzobasan Pamim Chola Shantu Sanwa Sanwa Chimon Papa Shani Zawanji Wang Bei Yige Chigba Ringong de Jino Omarna Pame Hong Wambo Jibarte Tama Gangatse Yige Chigba Ringong Chimbondo Jenbati Se Di Ze Alang Jil Hadang Jibadang Chedang Shangdang Chirki Ji Nabma Jendong Gurlo Yamsum Chang Namyang Chuzo Gagdang Varchit Batam Chikyang Chakso Mujendang Chimbodang Nabo Chimbo Vedmid Mambo Che Priyang Chuso Debjang Sherba Pamim Chogi Varlangar Nadan Jave Pomba Kyane Shanzu Sawa Sawa Chembon Poba Shane Zombo La Metik Semoto Yarton Ren Yarton Revam Burlo Dijang Lane Debjang Sherba Jumba on Doberzoba Sanji Nam Taila Perlo Dijang Lane Debjang Sherba Jumba on Doberzoba Pamim Chola Perlo Teni Debjang Sherba Jumba on Doberzoba Sanji Pamim Chogi Yige Tribering Chembondo Lane Jiktinji Kam Pama Kalavar Terok Shagso Rigiva Rigiva Muna Debjang Sherba Jumba on Doberzoba Sanji Pamim Chogle Tozo The Nip Jondan de Jabba number Seral and Dirkiji Quapsardo, Jondan de Ige Tribering Chembo or Namjur Shobata Kachester Tobr Gub, Jondan de where Navders Tobna Room Chogo, Room Yue, Chogo Matsarvate, Gender, Jondan de Dogdan Ige Tribering Chembo, Tubazam Jim Chogo Matsarlo. Semchin Gang the Ige Tribanda, Ring Chembondo, and Zapto Gibagam, Yambadan, Sembadam Samba. Lagben Zambana Sonum Dan Damba Lagso, Katsara Giva, Gang, Ige Tribering Chemondo. Drin Jigbatina Chuji Pombo Jatterton, Drin Jigber and Gero, Tens about Jamba on the Borzobasan, Dear, Der Charaptam Yambil, Hill, Sir Rumbochi. She the Jang, Shine Jang, Yamak Chigu Jenda, Ran Chirin Jigbatim, Jeva to Barmabana Ige Tribering Chemo. Ring Chimo Yigim Jigum Driver, Mambazam Te, Yondam Samgi Mekebo, Tarwana Shandone, so Tergiva Marigio, Conga Yige Tribber, Ring Chimondo, Dubra, Shepan, Tangins and the Tole, Tober and Gerto Tober and Gerworts.
Let us continue with our class on the Mahayana Sutra, the baskets display, the Sutra of Baskets display. Previously, we've already learned that Avalokiteshvara went to a great city of Varanasi, and then he transformed himself into the form of a bee, and then made a buzzing sound that was heard by the insects. In the Sanskrit version, instead of only Namo Buddhaya, there is also Namo Dharmaya and Namo Sanghaya. When we have the opportunity, we should really look into the Sanskrit version. Here says that all of the insects and maggots in the cesspit in the great city of Varanasi all then were reborn in the realm of Sukhavati. Namo Buddhaya means homage to the Buddha. If one were to chant only homage to Buddha, the beings would be able to be reborn in the pure world and pure realm. For such reason, whenever we see those maggots and animals and poor beings living in this world, we can chant either the Avalokiteshvara's mantra or Namo Amidavaya or Namo Shakyamuni Buddha and Namo Buddhaya. Those kinds of mantras are really important. Our merit cannot be compared with Avalokiteshvara, but if we were to generate great compassion and a pure intention to chant those, and those names would definitely be very beneficial to the poor sentient beings. Some of the beings in even the higher realms cannot even hear the names of the Buddha, don't even mention about the beings of the lower realms. For example, when I went to Africa at the time of giving the speech, I chanted lots of the names of the Buddhas because I thought the beings living in such kind of a land that without Dharma, they probably won't have the opportunities to listen to even the names of the Buddha in their lifetime. So I chanted some of the mantras, and they had no idea what I was chanting or singing, but I said that I was simply giving you some singing to wish you best of luck. Other than that, I had no other way to reverse their current fruition of their past karma, the karma that's been accumulated that comes to fruition. Within our propagation of the Dharma, we should also try our best to liberate the sentient beings. Now, Avalokiteshvara, after liberating the sentient beings, then parted to a different country, that is the kingdom of Magadha. Though that in the ancient history of India, there's also a kingdom named Magadha, but since this particular story is about the previous life of the Buddha, so it may not be the same Magadha that we know. Anyhow, there are different people sharing different names, but it doesn't mean that they are the same person. It is for the same reason we can understand the different names by different places. Now, after Avalokiteshvara had arrived in this land of Magadha, he saw beings that had lived for 20 years in the wilderness eating each other's flesh. Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara wondered, by what method can I bring contentment to these beings? Since in this kingdom there had been a drought for 20 years, and out of thirst and hunger, out of all kinds of suffering of the living conditions of the human beings and the other beings, the beings started eating each other's flesh. I think I've told this story before, that the year before I was born, it was the year of great famine. In my hometown, 3 people were just executed for death sentence, and then in the afternoon, some of the corpse had already been, some of the flesh of the corpse had already been carved out, especially around their thighs. It was because people were really hungry, so things such as people eating the flesh of each other had happened even in the recent history. Now, when we look at the story of Avalokiteshvara, over here, Avalokiteshvara, after coming here and witnessed this and thinking, contemplating to himself, to what method should I use to benefit the sentient beings? And then Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara then caused the divine rains to fall. First, there was a rain of water, and water brought them satisfaction. Then there came a rain of divine food with the supreme flavors, and they were completely filled. When they were completely satisfied by eating the food, a rain of grain fell. Then there fell sesame, rice, jujubes, and wild rice. Whatever those beings wished for, their wishes were fulfilled each time. Those beings in the land of Magadha were amazed. All of their wishes were fulfilled, and they were completely amazed. And then they all sat down together, seated. They asked each other, what deity manifested all of this? After the rain fell down, the whole land was quenched, and then everything started growing, crops and different kinds of vegetation. But after having rain is not enough, then there's the rain of the various kinds of provisions, such as jewels and vessels, that filled with all kinds of supreme flavors. And then all kinds of crops and grains also fell from the sky so that people would be able to enjoy it. At the time of suffering from hunger, religion, literature, science, and philosophy are not very attractive to people whom have not solved their very basic need for livelihood. At the time, those beings in the land of Magadha were completely amazed, really surprised, because such kinds of rare situations had never happened in the past. They suffered from 20 years of drought and famine. All of a sudden, rain and all kinds of provisions and food all rain down from the sky. So the people of the land of Magadha all sat down at one place together. After being seated, they asked each other, what deity manifested all these? This is really strange. What happened? Maybe at the time when their livelihood got a bit better, they got curious of the source of all the changes. At that time, among them there was one being who was many hundreds of thousands of years old. He was aged, old, feeble, hunchbacked, and bent like a cow's ear. He had lived for hundreds and thousands of years. He was one with great longevity. So naturally, he's very experienced and with great wisdom. So he told the group, saying that, well, this is not a power of other deity or of other devas. It is of the power of Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara. Only his power, only he has this kind of power. Sometimes we tend to look down at those seniors, those old-aged and looked feeble and with hunchback. But look at this old person whom was able to differentiate and know the source of all the changes, because nobody else in the land of Magadha knows it. And then the large gathering there asked him, what are the qualities of Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara? What are the characteristics, qualities of Avalokiteshvara? It is not necessarily auspicious signs, rather the quality, the main characteristic of Avalokiteshvara. Because they do not know what a bodhisattva is, nor who Avalokiteshvara was. And then this old man began to describe Avalokiteshvara's qualities to them. He said that Avalokiteshvara is a lamp for those in darkness. He is a parasol for those burned and pinned by the sun. He's like a grand tree that provides shades to protect those from the burning sun. He brings coolness. He is a river for those afflicted with thirst. He gives freedom from fear to those who are terrified and afraid. He gives freedom from fear. He provides courage and protection. He is a medicine for those afflicted with sickness. He is a father and mother for beings who suffer. He is a teacher of nirvana to those reborn in Avicii hell. Those are his specialties. He brings great kinds of merits and qualities and benefits to different beings in this world. This is how Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is. Those who remember his name will have happiness in this world and will completely leave behind every suffering in samsara. To chant the name of Avalokiteshvara, at the time of chanting, the other day I noticed not many of you know what I was chanting about, but I think there was a minor difference between my chanting of the name to the one that is included in the chant book, so let me try again here. I'm still not too familiar with this version. We used to chant this very often, but later on we somehow didn't chant as much. But I think you can chant it more often whenever possible. It seems that you really like to supplicate to Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva and then get rich. Don't really think about to liberate sentient beings if you don't chant the name of Avalokiteshvara. Over here, we have already talked about the qualities of Avalokiteshvara from the description of the old man. After hearing it, the whole gathering was really happy. And then the old man continued to say that those who continually gather and offer flowers and incense to Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara will become Chakravartinkins who possess the 7 jewels. Those in the world whom make a 4-sided mandala. We will continue to talk about this later. So on one side of the mandala, one would make offering of flowers and incense to Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, and such a person would be reborn as a Chakravartin that possess the 7 jewels. And 7 jewels are the precious wheel, the precious horse, the precious elephant, the precious jewel, the precious wife, the precious householder, and the precious counselor. Those who offer flowers to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara will have aromatic bodies, and wherever they are born, wherever they're reborn, their bodies will be perfect. Some Dharma masters would say that you should make offering to Avalokiteshvara and chant the mantra, and then I'll let you know what the quality of Avalokiteshvara is. And if you chant Om Mani Padme Hum often, you will also be reborn with this perfect endowment just like me. Now this old man taught Avalokiteshvara special qualities in that way. All kinds of qualities and all kinds of powers of Avalokiteshvara had been expounded by this old man. And then he walked away with his cane, went back to his home, and all of the group of people also went back to their homes. The aged man, having taught them the appropriate dharma, returned to his home, and Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara vanished into the sky. In this story, though Avalokiteshvara's form did not appear, he only used various methods to pour down the rain for the sentient beings suffering from drought. And then through the telling of this aged man, the beings in the kingdom generated great faith. In our world, it is difficult for us to see Avalokiteshvara with our eyes. However, through the tellings and teachings of the great masters, as well as the pith instructions of the gurus, we would know that Avalokiteshvara and how his qualities are. So we would supplicate very often, and for that, it is really wonderful. In China, in the mainland, in each of the households, there would be the supplication to Avalokiteshvara and Amitabha. That was how it used to be, just as how in Tibet, people tend to make supplications to the Taras. Sometimes people would even supplicate to the Tara in order to give them blessings, even when they're about to carry out some wrong deeds, such as stealing, and they would ask the Tara to give them grant them the blessings. In the southern part of China, people also would practice the supplication of Avalokiteshvara even before they would go on a fishing trip and stealing and so on. So Avalokiteshvara, as long as the sentient beings have different wishes, Avalokiteshvara would grant the wishes to come true. Sometimes we don't necessarily see Avalokiteshvara's true form, but just as how this aged man in the kingdom of Magadha would tell the later generation of the qualities of Avalokiteshvara, we similarly could understand who Avalokiteshvara is and the qualities of him through the previous great masters. After we generated faith from those teachings, after we developed certainty in the quality of Avalokiteshvara, we need to also spread the teachings on Avalokiteshvara as well, so that sentient beings would be able to chant the name of Avalokiteshvara. Also, if a person at the time of death were to, or any sentient beings at the time of death were to hear the name and mantra of Avalokiteshvara, then you could chant 7 times of the mantra to that person or that sentient being. That would be really wonderful. If a person at the time of death, if a person were to hear the mantra of Avalokiteshvara in Tibet, we would consider that is very good. So whenever you hear the news of death, or whenever you hear people are suffering, you should then automatically chant Om Mani Padme Hum and develop it as your habit. Nowadays, I notice that some of the Han practitioners develop this habit of chanting Om Banzar Sadhu Hum to confess their flaws, such as at the time of speaking ill of the others. People would chant the mantra at the same time as speaking ill of the others. So that's the habit that you've learned. Another habit I would like to remind you that you should chant Om Mani Padme Hum whenever you hear of the news of death, or whenever you think of your parents. I would do that whenever I think of my parents. I would chant Om Mani Padme Hum. But this is really to the sentient beings, but not really to our guru. For example, I would not say Om Mani Padme Hum whenever I think of Bonsuk Rinpoche. Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara vanished into the sky. He ascended and then vanished into the sky. So from this description, we can assume that the land of Magda is probably somewhere on the ground and maybe Jambudvipa. While Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara was in the sky, he thought, it has been a long time since I've seen Tathagata Vishvabhu. So he next went to Jatana monastery. And Bhagavat Vishvabhu saw him coming. As Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara approached the Jetavana monastery, there was a gathering of thousands and tenth of thousands of devas, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, the kinnaras, the mahoragas, the humans and non-humans, and a gathering of many hundreds of bodhisattvas. Out of hundreds of bodhisattvas gathered there, Bodhisattva Gaganaganja asked Bhagavat Vishvabhu, saying that Bhagavat, which bodhisattva is arriving? Maybe he asked on purpose. Maybe he knows it. Bhagavat Vishvabhu then said, this is Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara who is arriving. Your idol is coming. Your favorite celebrity is coming. Isn't it that you wanted to see him? And then Bodhisattva at this point, Bodhisattva Gaganaganja didn't reply anything. He just kept quiet. Maybe sometimes when people truly long for their teacher, their lama, at the time of them arriving, they couldn't help themselves but to scream and feel really touched. And sometimes the mundane beings, at the times of seeing celebrities and singers approaching, they would start screaming with all kinds of abrupted emotions, and then we should compare ourselves to Bodhisattva Gaganaganja. He was quite quiet and just awaited quietly. Bhagavat Vishvabhu over here, after being greeted by Avalokiteshvara, asked him, are you tired? Are you weary? Noble son, what work have you been doing? And then Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara told Vishvabhu what had occurred. He then replied to the Bhagavat by saying that, I did so and so, I liberated sentient beings in hell realm, in Avicii hell realm, and then from the Preta city, and then Asura's kingdom, also Yakshas and Rakshasas kingdom, and then Varanasi, and then land of Magda. It seems that Avalokiteshvara made this clear introduction of where he had been. Just like some people, there's this person I know, he's from Gyarong, and he would tell me all the places that he's been to. It seems to be quite nagging, and sometimes it could be a demonstration of his good memory as well, or maybe just because of his particular habit. Over here, Avalokiteshvara told the Bhagavat that he went to so-and-so place. After telling all of the places that he went to, then Bodhisattva Gaganaganja was extremely amazed and said that I have never seen such a field of activities as that of this Bodhisattva. There is no such field of activity among the Tathagatas, let alone among the Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattva Gaganaganja now came to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara and said before him, this part is a little bit difficult to understand in the Chinese translation. In the Chinese translation, it says that the Tathagatas liberate sentient beings, that is not different than this bodhisattva. And the Tibetan translation says that the field of activity among the Tathagatas, there is no such activity among the Tathagatas, let alone among the bodhisattvas. Yesterday we encountered a portion of the Chinese translation that is a bit difficult to understand. It was about the 12 Ganges rivers. And then in the next part, there's something that is a bit similar, where it says about the 12 Buddhas in 12 aeons. To expound the merits of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara would still be would still be infinite, would still not be expounded in full. Yesterday we covered a little bit about the different translation and the different ways of understanding the two translations, the Chinese and the Tibetan. Anyhow, at that time, since the Bodhisattva Gaganaganja felt Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is indeed really marvelous, because his activities can barely be done by the Tathagatas. Therefore, Bodhisattva Gaganaganja now came to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara and said before him, seated, and he asked Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, "Are you tired? Are you weary?" And then Avalokiteshvara replied saying, "I'm not tired, I'm not weary, I'm used to it." And then Bodhisattva Gaganaganja stopped talking again, stopped asking again, which is similar to some of our fellow Sangha members as well. I remembered an officer over here told me that he talked to a team leader from the Sangha for nearly an hour, and the team leader simply nodded heads and said, okay, and then left. So this particular Sangha member has a similar personality to the Bodhisattva Gaganaganja. He only asked, "Are you tired? Are you worried?" and then stopped talking. At that time, Bhagavata Vishvabu then began to teach upon the 6 perfections. Noble sons, listen, having become a bodhisattva, you must complete the perfection of generosity. Similarly, you must complete the perfection of conduct, the perfection of patience, the perfection of diligence, the perfection of meditation, the perfection of wisdom. Having taught that Dharma, he then became silent. And then this Dharma assembly seems to be quite silent. Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara simply said that I'm not tired and not weary. Not many asked the questions, not too many interactions among each other either. Maybe all the bodhisattvas are simply abiding in a retreat situation. And then having assembled beings, having done the Dharma assembly, the assembled beings each returned to their own dwelling places, and the bodhisattvas returned to their own Buddha realms. This is the completion of the 3rd volume, and a completion of part 1 according to the Tibetan translation. Now we're going to look at another really well-known story of Avalokiteshvara. The story of King Bali was quite well-known, and the following one is also very well-known. Today we will be having a longer class, but we should persevere. I think this would be better. At that time, the Bodhisattva Sarvanivarana Vishkambin then said to Bhagavat, saying that Bhagavat, I request that you teach what samadhis Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara had previously remained in. So over here, the Buddha will start to expound on the various kinds of powers of Avalokiteshvara. He first went to the hell realm and then to the various different worlds to benefit sentient beings that had already been expounded. And after listening to that, Bodhisattva Sarvanivarana Vishkambin then asked the Buddha, saying that what kind of samadhi does this bodhisattva has this bodhisattva had attained? Without samadhi, how could a bodhisattva benefit sentient beings? So he definitely has great powers of samadhi. And then he asked what kinds of samadhis had a bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara had previously remained in. And then the Bhagavat said, noble son, there are many different samadhis that Avalokiteshvara had remained in, such as the samadhi named creation, samadhi named illumination, named sublime vajra, named the sunlight, the samadhi named dispersal, the samadhi named armlet, the samadhi named supreme vajra victory banner. I've already given all of those samadhis names in the Tibetan translation, so I'm not going to repeat all the samadhis names. I do know how to read them. I'm just simply saving some time to repeat them again. There are 62 samadhis names within the Chinese and the Tibetan, but in the English translation, there are 69 samadhis. So 7 extra samadhis from the translation from the Sanskrit version, that is. And then the Bhagavad continued to say that noble son, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara has those samadhis. Not only those, in each of his pores there are 100,000 samadhis. So not only Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara has the samadhi in his mind stream, he also has the samadhis, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands samadhis in his pores. Noble son, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara thus has an incalculable accumulation of merit. Even the Tathagatas do not have that kind of accumulation of merit, let alone a bodhisattva. According to the Tibetan version, this is where the third volume begins. I think there are different ways of making calculations. Now the story begins. We're probably going to take about half an hour. The Buddha over here told Bodhisattva Sarvanivarana Vishkambin, saying that in the past, when I was a bodhisattva, I was going to the island of Simhala, this island or kingdom of Simhala, with 500 merchants. In my translation of the extensive biography of Shakyamuni Buddha, this story was also included in there. Mainly, this extensive biography of Shakyamuni Buddha, the White Lotus, talks about his stories of at the causal stage. And within the biography of 8 bodhisattvas, there is the story of Avalokiteshvara. The 2 characters that appears in this story, one is of the previous life of Avalokiteshvara, and the other one is the previous life of Shakyamuni Buddha. The stories are included in the story of Shakyamuni Buddha's biography, the extensive biography, the White Lotus, and then the previous life of Avalokiteshvara is included in the biography of the 8 great bodhisattvas. I hope that you can understand it, and I hope that you can remember it in your heart, especially after we've already translated those texts. As a Buddhist, we need to remember both Avalokiteshvara and Shakyamuni Buddha. Now, the 2 characters within, over here, the Buddha said that when he was traveling with the 500 merchants, from Shakyamuni Buddha's point of view, he said that we were going to Simhala Island, bringing much merchandise in chariots, in bags, baskets, and pots carried by camels, oxen, donkeys, and so on, so as to go to villages, towns, suburbs, cities, and markets. I found an excellent ship that had been to Simhala Island many times. Asked the pilot, towards what islands are the winds blowing? You should really look at the direction of the wind. Are the winds blowing towards Ratna Dvipa, or are the winds blowing towards Yavana Dvipa, or are the winds blowing towards the island of the Rakshasis? Back then, there were no GPS used to direct the location, the direction. So they have to rely on the direction of wind as well as the pilot. The pilot, after making the observation of the breeze, of the direction of the wind, the pilot answered, "Know this, Lord, the breeze is blowing towards Simhala Island." So they all then set sail in that great ship in the direction of Simhala Island. But the Rakshasis who lived on Simhala Island sent untimely winds that broke the great ship into pieces. After those great winds and ghastly winds and great waves crushes the ship then broke into pieces. Then all of them fell into the water and swam to the shore. After falling into the water, they swam to the shore. After arriving to the shore, the 500 Rakshasis took on the form of maidens. They were quite happy. In fact, Rakshasis can be quite terrifying. They have really displeasing appearances, and then they have those sharp teeth. They can appear to be quite terrifying, but at the time of seeing those merchants, they appear to be really beautiful. The Rakshasis have this particular capacity. At the times of consuming people, they would first turn to be beautiful maidens and then would attract other people. After attracted those people, they would reveal their true appearance, which is quite terrifying. The 500 Rakshasis then, with a great cry, came down to the shore. They give those merchants cotton robes and food and so on, all kinds of provisions. So the Buddha said that we then put them on, run our clothes dry, and went to sit under a large magnolia tree seated. We talked among ourselves, asking each other what we should do. At the time of taking rest under the large magnolia tree, at the time of resting over there, the Rakshasis started having conversations with them. So they asked the Rakshasis, saying that initially we wanted to go to Simhala island. However, now we've been washed to the shore of this island. And they said that there was nothing that they could do, and they became silent. They probably felt that they were that they lost all the hope. The Rakshasis then came to them and said that you who are not masters of a house become masters. You who have no refuge obtain a refuge. You who have no home obtain a home. These will be your homes supplied with food. These will be your homes supplied with drink. These will be your gardens for you to enjoy. These will be your bathing pools for you to enjoy. There are 500 Rakshasis and 500 merchants. So after the Rakshasis had spoken to us, then each one took a merchant home to become master of their house. This situation reminded me of the recent news that 10 refugees from Ukraine, after arriving at a different country at the train station, were then abducted by 10 men. The 10 women were abducted by 10 men. It is indeed immoral, as those people left their country out of fear of war. However, at the time of being picked up at the train station, they got picked up by or abducted by others and being taken advantage. So over here, it says that the 500 merchants were taken to different households of different Rakshasis. But according to the Tibetan translation, it says that there is an old Rakshasis that was the leader or senior Rakshasi. There is a discrepancy between the Tibetan translation and the Sanskrit translation. In the Sanskrit version, the senior means mainly the leader. And then this senior Rakshasi, in fact, is the Rakshasi that took Shakyamuni Buddha's previous life, that was the merchant home. And her name was Ratikara. There are different ways of explaining what Ratikara is. Over here, Ratikara is explained as the queen of Rakshasis. The main character is, she is the main character. It says that in the later part, in the evening, she would laugh. And in the evening, she tells the merchant to leave and saying that this is the kingdom of Rakshasis. And then in the daytime, she doesn't want him to leave, so she would change her mind during the day and through the night. That is why the merchant had to escape from the household and from the kingdom of Rakshasis in the evening and finally went back to Jambudvipa. But now some of the scholars would argue that Ratikara is a name that means, that has the meaning of lamp. And then later there is a translation that is available in Nepal, which was translated from Sanskrit as well. And in that translation it says that Ratikara is a burning lamp. So inside this household there is the merchant, the Rakshasis, and then the lamp. But according to the Chinese translator and the Tibetan translator, they do not consider this Radhikara as a lamp, they would consider this as the name. They thought that this is the name of the Rakshasis. If you were to take the translation as the Radhikara being a lamp, then this lamp is a burning and talking lamp. This quite be rare. But I think the Rakshasis probably doesn't want to keep this talking lamp at her own household. Some scholars argue that this particular Radhikara has the meaning of lamp, and the translation from Nepal is not necessarily all correct. The reason is that I understand sometimes the Tibetan translators may not understand that term correctly. However, the Chinese translation, which has a 500-year gap between the two translations, the Tibetan and Chinese, how could the Chinese translator not know that this particular word refers to the name of Rakshasi but not the lamp? For that reason, the translation of Nepal that is translated from Sanskrit may have made a mistake. Or maybe in the language of Nepal, in the Nepalese language, it could mean a lamp and it could mean a name. When we make the comparisons in the Sanskrit version, then we can come to a final conclusion. So it's something that we still need to make observation about. Now this particular story is included in the Vinaya Sutra as well. But in the Vinaya Sutra, I only had seen the later part, not the first part of this story. If we were to look into the Vinaya Sutra that's translated by Master Yi Jing, they did not mention that this is a lamp. So maybe the scholars from Nepal did not understand it, or maybe because the scholars feel that a woman at a time teaching the merchant to the Rakshasi at the time teaching the merchant to run away in the evening and then tell him to stay in the day is not possible. Maybe they feel that the Rakshasi must like the merchant all the time. But there is the fluctuation of the mood during the day and during the night. There are different kinds of mindset. For such reason, there are the changes of the tone or changes of ideas. At the evening, then Rakshasi would tell him that, oh, you have to go because this is the kingdom of the Rakshasis. And then during the day, she then changes her mind and then started to say that, oh, you should stay here and you shouldn't go. Or maybe she likes to speak in her dreams and she speaks her truth in the evening, but speaks with her logic during the day. So this particular story, I will tell you this based on the logic from the Chinese translation, and then you can also come to your own contemplation and your own understanding. I personally feel that the particular explanation in the other versions are all right too, but I would prefer the Chinese and the Tibetan translations. Now let us continue with the sutra. Over here in the sutra, it says that the senior Rakshasi, Radhikara, took me home to be the master of her house. She satisfied me with the food and drink and clothing, and the kinds of pleasures that I received at her household satisfied me with all the human pleasures. That is no difference than the human realm. Now, 2 or 3 to 7 days after I stayed over there. According to the Chinese translation, it says 2 to 3 weeks, because every 7 days is a week, and 2 or 3 of those 7 days, you can calculate it in such a way. But I think if you were to combine the later content with this particular timeline, then it could be a bit different. Because in the later part of the content, it says that out of the 500 merchants, majority of them had then give birth to a girl and a boy. So that's when he started to have the realization and decided to leave. Therefore, it is not just 1 or 2 weeks. It should be that he stayed there for many years. According to the Vinaya Sutra, it says that he stayed there for a few years. And then it is only at the very beginning there was a period of time where the Rakshasi suddenly started laughing. In the Tibetan translation of that, it says that she would sleep, and in her dreams she would be laughing. Then this merchant generated lots of doubts because he had never seen a woman that would sleep and laugh at the same time. So the Rakshasi, at the time of laughing, he asked her, "Why are you laughing?" And then Rakshasi answered, "This is the kingdom of Rakshasis, and the Rakshasis will kill you. You will die here." And then the merchant asked, "How do you know?" The Rakshasi said that if you don't believe me, you should go to the south, and then you would see this high fortress without windows or doors that's made of iron. Many hundreds of merchants have been thrown in there. Some are alive, some are dead. If you don't believe me, follow that road and observe, then you will believe me. For that reason, at the time when Rakshasi was still asleep, this merchant then carried a sword that glowed like moonlight, and then took the road that led south and followed it until eventually he came to an iron fortress. He walked around. It looks like a large prison, and he couldn't find a door. However, there was a magnolia tree beside the iron fortress. So he climbed up on it and made the sound of spitting, and then the merchants inside heard him. The merchants inside the fortress saying that, "Great head merchant, know this. We have been thrown into this iron fortress. Each day 100 men are taken and eaten. When they have been eaten, their bones are scattered around the iron fortress." It is stated that the Rakshasis constantly change different people to live with. At first, whenever there are some of the merchants that comes from Jambudvipa, they will be really happily to receive them. After that, some of them then had children with those Rakshasis. Then they would throw the old merchants into the fortress and then eat the old merchants that's been locked up in the fortress, and then stay with the new guests or new merchants. That is how they described what happened to them. So this then merchant climbed down to from the magnolia tree and then went quickly back up along the southern road. When he returned back to the house, Then the Rakshasi asked him, "Head merchant, what did you see?" And then he answered, "I saw." And then he asked, "What can I do? What should I do to leave here?" Maybe the Rakshasi at the time was asleep. So the Rakshasi said that, "Well, I do have a skillful means for you to happily and comfortably leave Simhala Island and see Jambudvipa once again." So he asked again, saying that, "Can you tell me what is the way?" And then Rakshasi said, "There is a divine king of horses named Balaha." Balaha is the divine king of horses. According to the Vinaya Sutra's translation, it is translated as Poloho. And that is according to the Tibetan translation. The Chinese translation didn't specify the name for this king of horses. This divine king of horses is the previous life of Avalokiteshvara. This horse, the king of horses, eats the herb named Savarsitana. After he finished eating, he would roll back and forth on the shore that is made of golden sand. And then he would shake his body, and then he would ask, "Who is going to cross over to the far shore?" This king of horses would usually stay over there at the shore on the 15th of the month to save the beings from that island of Rakshasas. At the time of hearing this, you should then ask, "Lord, I am going to cross over to the far shore, to Jambudvipa." Maybe he went there in the evening because at the night the Rakshasi would fall asleep and sleep and dream talk to tell him the ways to run out and what kind of method that he could take. Over here, it says that once the Rakshasi had told me this, I went to lie down next to the Rakshasi. She awoke and asked me, "Noble son, why is your body cold?" I answered, "I went outside to the town to defecate and urinate. That's why my body has become cold." Well, he went really far to do that. And so she went back to sleep again. At sunrise, the merchant then got up and said to all the merchants, "Come with me, we're going outside the town." So in the morning, he called all of his merchant friends, saying that, "Oh, we're going outside of the town, we're going somewhere else to get together." Then all the merchants left the town and gathered over there and started chatting. So the merchant started asking the rest of them, saying that, "How affectionate are your wives towards you?" Some said that, "Oh, she's very loving towards me," and some said that she takes care of me with food and has perfect divine flavors. And some said, "She provides me with all kinds of clothing," and some said, "Oh, she gives me the items and the earrings and necklaces." And some said that, "I don't have to do any physical work at all." Some translations means that I can't receive anything. I don't receive anything, but according to the Tibetan translation, says that, "Oh, I'm doing well. I don't have to do any physical work." There are different translations, a bit difficult to understand, but the Chinese translation shows that I have nothing to obtain, and I'm not very content. That's according to the Chinese translation. And then some said that she cares for me with sandalwood, musk, and camphor. There are different answers. After the merchant told me these things, then the leader merchant said to them, "It is not right for us to be attached to the Rakshasis in this way." After the Rakshasis are attached to a person, then she will definitely grasp onto you and create lots of suffering. As we had studied earlier, the Rakshasis do not have any compassion. Also, they would only eat the blood and flesh of human beings to keep themselves alive. That is simply their nature. The Rakshasis are like the wolves and those animals, the wild beast that eats only flesh. Other than that, there is no compassion attached to Rakshasis. So, over here, the merchant told the rest of the fellow merchants, saying that it is not right for us to be attached to Rakshasis in this way. They were disturbed by my words. The fellow merchants were very much disturbed by the leader merchant, and then asked, "Great head merchant, is it true that there are Rakshasis who live on the Simphala island?" And then this head merchant answered, saying that it is true. Indeed, it is true. By the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, they are not humans. Maybe because the rest of the fellow merchants do not believe in the head merchant, so he particularly brings out the three jewels to say that they're not humans. By the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I can assure you that they're not humans, they're Rakshasis. The merchants asked me, "What can we do? Do you have a plan for us?" Then I told them, on the Simphala island, there is Balaha, the king of horses, who has compassion for the desolate and destitute. He eats the herb called Savasitana, rolls back and forth on the golden sand and shakes his body, and then asks 3 times who is going to cross over to the far shore, who is going to cross over to the far shore. He would ask that for 3 times, and we should go with him. The merchant then asked me, "On which day should we go?" And I answered, "We should definitely leave in 3 days. Each person should prepare provisions for the journey." After everybody agreed, then they returned back to their town and then each to their own home, getting ready to prepare their provisions so that they can part ways. We still have a part that we need to finish, but we don't have to rush. Should I finish this story today or next week? Next week? Today? As long as you're not in a rush. Well, I think I'll finish today. Otherwise, if we were to give teachings next week, you probably will forget about the story. Now, after the head merchant returned back to the household of the senior Rakshasi, the Rakshasi asked me, saying that, "Are you tired? Are you weary?" And then he replied by changing a topic so that he could get out of that topic. And he said that there are delightful gardens and delightful bathing pools. I haven't seen any. And then the Rakshasi said that in Simhala Island there are pleasing gardens of all kinds that are completely filled with flowers, and there are many hundreds of bathing pools. And then the head merchant said that I will go to those gardens and the various flowering pools in 3 days' time. I will gather beautiful flowers there, and then return. I'll give you back the beautiful flowers. Maybe because the women all like flowers. So the head merchant said that I want to go and gather some beautiful flowers, and then I'll return back with the flowers for you. Therefore, you should prepare good traveling provisions for me. And then Rakshasi said, Noble son, I will do so. And then he doesn't want her to know what his true intention is, so he kept quiet for the 2 or 3 days' time. He said that he contemplated in such a way that these Rakshasis will kill us if they find out. So he remained silent, contemplating this predicament. The Rakshasi served him with good food as he ate it, and then he sighed. The Rakshasi then asked him again, saying that, Noble son, why did you sigh? Why are you not happy? And then he said to her that the people of Jambuvipa and my homeland are so pleasant. The Rakshasi said, Oh, noble son, that would you do? What would you do in your homeland? In this Simhala Island, you have a home with food, a home with drink, a home with clothes, a variety of delightful gardens, a variety of delightful bathing pools. Enjoy these divine pleasures. Do not think so much about your homeland. You do not think so much about Jambuvipa. Why be so sorrowful in Jambuvipa? And then the head merchant said nothing in reply. 3 days passed, and that day passed, and then on the second day, the provisions of good food were quickly prepared. Everyone had made the provisions and preparations, and then at the downtime, on the third day, all the merchants left the city, coming out through its gate. Let's see if the journey is going to be smooth and at ease for them. On the third day, all of the merchants left the city, coming out through the gates, and then when they were all outside, they agreed that not one of them would turn to look back at Simhala Island. So, not looking back at Simhala, not looking back at the Rakshasi wives and their children. After they all had made that agreement, they hurried as quickly as they could and eventually reached the location of Balaha, the king of horses. Balaha, the king of horses, was enjoying the Savarsitana herb when he finally finished enjoying the Savarsitana herb. He rode back and forth on the golden sand and shook his body. When he shook his body, the island of Simhala shook. It is said that in the island of Simhala, whenever there are the sails, there are 2 types of sails. There's the auspicious sail and then the vicious sail. The vicious sail is that when it is a signal to say that the merchant husbands were about to leave the Rakshasis, and the other one, the auspicious ones, would bring the new husbands to the island. At that time, when the island shook, the king of horses asked that, where are you going? At the time of heading out, the king of horses started to say that at the time of parting from here, you should not look back at Simhala Island. None of you must turn your eyes towards Simhala Island. None of you should even think about Simhala Islands and the Rakshasi wives as well as your children. So the 500 merchants agreed to do so as he said. Then first the head merchant alone mounted him, and then the 500 merchants mounted him. When they all mounted, the Rakshasis who lived on the Simhala island came running after them, making a great clamor, weeping and wailing pitifully. After being mounted on the king of horses, even if they were to hold on to one hair of the horse, as long as they do not have any grasping and attachment to the Simhala island or to the Rakshasis' wives, then they would not be persuaded or they would not be fallen from the back of the horse. So that really shows the power of mind is really great. On top of that, the specific character to this king of horses is quite grand. This very large horse that can mount 500 people. And this is probably very difficult for us to imagine. Maybe it's a very long horse, maybe it's a very large horse, it's very hard to say. Anyhow, after they mount to the horse, the Rakshasis then run after them and weeping and wailing pitifully. Hearing the noise, the merchants turned around and looked back at them. And when they did so, they fell headlong into the water. When they had fallen into the water, the Rakshasis pulled them out and ate them. According to some other sutras and teachings, it says that not only they ate the merchants, they in fact ate even the soil that tinted with the blood of the merchants. So they're quite vicious. The Rakshasis are quite vicious. And then the Rakshasis ate the rest of the 500 merchants except the head merchant that was the previous life of Shakyamuni Buddha. So the head merchant then went back to Jambuvipa alone. When he reached the shore, he circumambulated Balaha, the king of horses, 3 times, bowed to him, and then departed. He journeyed towards his home and eventually arrived there. His father and mother embraced him and wept, and their tears dissolved their cataracts as they regained their sight. Then he sat with the parents and told them everything that had happened. His parents then said, "Son, we have got you back alive. You are now finally safe and sound. We do not need wealth. We only need a walking stick for when we are old. We do not need any wealth. We're very happy that you're home. We're just really aged. We're old, and we need a walking stick for when we're old, someone to guide us on the path when we're blind, someone to make food offering to us when we have died, and someone to be our protector when we are dead. Oh, my child, you have brought us delight like a cooling breeze. That is what my parents said to me." Then the Buddha told Sarvani Varana Vishkambin Bodhisattva, saying that those are the sufferings I had experienced when I was a head merchant. Sarvani Varana Vishkambin, it was like this. Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara was Balaha, the king of horses, and he rescued me from the fear of death. At the back of the Vinaya Sutra, there is 2 shlokas where it says that the foolish ones that do not believe in the Buddha Dharma and suffering from the pain of samsara, just like being attached to Rakshasis. In this story, it talks about the downfalls of being attached. When we look at this story, the 500 merchants had all died except the head merchant. Also, according to the Vinaya Sutra, the other quotation says that if a wise one were to follow the teachings of Buddha Dharma, is just like being liberated from the ocean of death, the ocean of birth and death, just as someone that followed the king of horse, that is Balaha. Because the king of horse Balaha told them the key, which is do not grasp, do not look back, do not be attached, otherwise you will suffer. It is only the head of merchant did not generate any attachment, and that's how he escaped from the island of Simhala. So for beings that has wisdom, after eradicating their greed and desire and attachments, then they would be able to attain liberation, just as how we would listen to the teachings from our teachers, which lead to the generation of renunciation and then lead us to attain bodhisattvahood and liberate sentient beings. So let's stop here today.